Now we are going to learn about pattern programming. Before that, let us look how console screen looks like. Console screen is a 2 by 2 matrix of rows and columns. So these are all rows and these are all columns. Each combination of row and column is a display unit. So at the first display unit we have display W, and in the next display unit we have another W, and so on. In the next row we have few blank spaces and then another row with these characters. So each display unit is capable of displaying one character constant. Now how the screen structure is accessed? It is not always necessary to specify a display unit in terms of rows and columns, but if you want to access a particular location, like in this case 3 and 3, in that case you'd ideally require that location of that particular display unit. Console screen has something called as cursor. So when your screen is blank, the cursor will be at this location, which is the starting location. So cursor will be blinking over here. So as soon as something is written over here, like in this case, when W is written, then the cursor will move on to the next screen and then it will print something else. So like in this example, once all of these rows are printed, then cursor will be at this location. Depending on different screen resolution and sizes, total number of available rows and columns can vary. So on some screens, it could be 80 rows and columns, or maybe 80 by 90, 100 or 100 by 50, and so on. So this is something that depends on hardware and software configuration. In the next video, we are going to learn about actual pattern programming, which are common shapes to be printed on your output screen like this, and so on. These are very common problems, but are very important while you develop your programming logic. This will make your understanding of for loops and screen formatting very clear. In this lesson, we are going to check few programs based on pattern programming. This is our 34th program in the 101 program series, and the expected out in this program is something like this. So user will be entering a number n, and we are going to print n stars on n number of rows. So suppose user has entered 6 as input, then on 6 rows 6 stars will be printed. So this is the expected output. So let us see how we can solve this problem. In the program, I am asking user to enter number n. I have initialized variable n. I and n are two variables which I am going to use to represent rows and columns for my console screen. So this is a sample console screen. This I am just using to illustrate you this better. So user's input I am storing into variable n, and then this is my first for loop. So the first for loop I am using for iterating rows, and the next for loop is for iterating columns. So now let us see how compiler will be executing these instructions. So initially I am initializing I equal to 1. Let us assume that user has entered n as 6. So 1 is less than or equal to 6, which is a true condition. So the controller will enter inside the loop, and inside the loop my first statement is for another for loop where I am initializing j equal to 1, and again j is less than or equal to 6, which is a true condition. So controller will go inside the second loop and it will print my first star at this location. Then j will be incremented to 2. Again the condition will be checked, and because 2 is less than or equal to 6, that is true condition, a second star will be printed. Why? Because j has initialized. Notice these are values of j and these are values of I. So the condition will become only false when j will be 7. So once j becomes 7, so condition to be checked will be 7 less than or equal to 6, which is a false condition. So till this point, program has printed 6 stars and cursor is at this location. And once my condition becomes false, it will come out of this for loop, and then we are instructing for a new line character. So cursor will move on to the next row, and then as this was my last statement of this for loop, then I will be incremented, it will become 2. So this condition will be true, and then this whole block will be repeated. So for the second row, these stars will be printed again, and then the cursor will come on to the next row at this location. So this process will be continued while I and n do not become greater than 6. So my final output will be something like this, and cursor will be at this location. So once the main for loop is also terminated, program will also get terminated. In this program, we are going to check this pattern. Now we need to notice that for printing this pattern, what we need to do first is to analyze this pattern. So in the problem statement, so if user has entered 5 as input to the program, then the pattern is going to print 5 rows. For the first row, there is 1 star. For the second row, there are 2 stars, and so on. And on the last row, there are 5 stars. So from this, what we can understand is I am printing stars for I times. Why? I am using I as row indicator. Okay, so in the program, I am asking user to enter the number and I am storing into n. Then for rows, I am initializing my variable I to 1. So this loop will work for n rows, and the second for loop is doing the magic over here. I am going to change the condition to j less than or equal to I. So till the point j does not reach value of I, which is my current row index, till that time it will print star. So let us see how it is happening in the program. Assuming user has entered 5. So initially over here I is 1, the condition is true, 1 is less than 5. In the second for loop, j is equal to 1, and it will continue the iterations till j does not become greater than I. So 1 is less than or equal to 1, it will print star over here, and cursor will move on to the next display unit. Now j will be incremented to 2, and the condition will become false because 2 is not greater than 1. So this for loop will be terminated, and on the next line I have written printf /n. So cursor will move on to the next line because /n is a new line character, and after that I will be incremented to 2. So again 2 is less than 5, so the condition holds true, and controller will go inside the for loop and second for loop will be executed. So what second for loop is going to do now? It will iterate twice for 1 and 2. So it will print 2 stars over here and cursor will be here, and once the for loop terminates, cursor will move on to the next line. So this process will be continued for 5 rows, and the final output would be this, and at the end of the program cursor will be at this location. Now in the next program, let us check this new pattern. So what is happening over here? Very important point that I want to make while solving problems related to pattern programming is that half of the problem is solved when you understand the given pattern first. So let us see in this pattern what is happening. Suppose user has entered 5. So obviously there are 5 rows. Okay, so this is my first row, this is second, third, fourth and fifth. Okay, so for the first row, program is going to print 5 stars. So that is my n stars. And then in the second row, there are 4 stars, that is n minus 1. And in the third row, there are n minus 2, then n minus 3, then n minus 4. So that is 1 star. So we need to decrement counter value of n by 1 for each row. So this is one way to look at this problem. Alternatively, there is easier way also. See, notice that we are decrementing value of n by 1 on each iteration of the row. Okay, but if you check this sequence, this is nothing but your original n, then n minus 1, n minus 2 and so on. So number of rows that we are required to print for this pattern are same, either you loop incrementally or decrementally. But if we use for loop in decrementing order, then it will be easier for us to print number of stars. So in the first loop, what we can do is we can use the loop in decrementing order. That is, I can initialize I to n. That is the final value. Then I'll check the condition while I is greater than or equal to 1, and then decrement I by 1 using I minus minus. And inside of my for loop, I can just initialize j equal to 1, and I just need to loop j for I times. So condition will be j less than or equal to 1, and then I'll increment j plus plus. Let us understand how every iteration will work over here. So initially in the first loop, I will be initialized to 5, and the condition will be checked as 5 greater than or equal to 1, which is a true condition. Hence controller will go inside the loop, and because I is equal to 5, so this part will be executed for 5 times, that is from j equal to 1 till 5, because the condition is j less than or equal to 5. So this block will be executed 5 times. So initially the cursor will be here, then it will print star 5 times over here, and cursor will come on to this location. Once j becomes 6, this condition will be false. Then we are just feeding a /n over here, so compiler will come on to the next line, and then I will be decremented, it will become 4. Then the second loop will be executed for 4 times. Then cursor will come over here, again it will come on to the next line because of /n. So this whole process will be repeated till I becomes 0, and then the program will be terminated. So my final output will be like this, and in the end cursor will be over here. We are now moving on to program number 37, in which we have this pattern. Now notice that in this pattern we are printing stars, but to have this pattern printed we need to add few spaces as well in this area. So there are spaces on these locations. Now it is obvious that for printing these n rows we need to have our first for loop, that is starting from 1 to n, and then if you just notice on the first row we are printing n stars, and then on the second row we are printing n minus 1, and so on. So our loop for printing star can start from I till n. So when I will be 1, this loop will print 1 to 5, so 5 stars. So on the first line it will print 5 stars, and on the second line the value of I will be 2, so it will print 2 to 5, so that will be 4 total stars. So this for loop is used for printing stars like this, and then to add these spaces we are using another variable k. So for spaces we can notice that on first row there is 0 space, and on the next row there is 1 space, and on the third row there are 2, and so on. So we need to print these spaces less than 1 iteration of the value n. Hence this for loop will be doing the job of printing spaces. So we are starting value from 1, and notice important condition, that is k less than 1. So on the first row this for loop will not be executed because I will be 1 and 1 is not less than 1. So on the first screen space will not be printed. However, on the next screen when I will be 2, because we are initializing k with 1 and condition will be checked as 1 less than 2, which is a true condition, so 1 space will be printed over here, and then k will be incremented, but k will become 2 and the condition will be false, so this for loop will be terminated, and then in the next for loop stars will be printed. So let us see what will happen on the output screen. Assuming user has entered 5, so I will be 1 and my cursor will be at this location. So our main loop will be executing for 5 times, starting from 1 till 5. So in the first iteration I is initialized to 1, then in the second for loop k will be initialized to 1 and this condition will be false, so nothing will happen with this block, and then in the next loop j is initialized to I, which is 1, and the condition will be checked for 1 less than equal to 5. So this loop will execute 5 stars like this, and cursor will come on to this location. Once this for loop gets completed, we are feeding one new line character, so cursor will come on the next line, and then in the next iteration I will become 2. So for loop of k is initialized to 1, and because our I has become 2 now, so condition will be checked as 1 less than 2, so this loop will be executed once only, so it will print a blank space over here, and then the next for loop will be executed 4 times, so it will print 4 stars like this, and then cursor will be on this location, and because of /n cursor will come on to next line. Again value of I will be incremented, I will become 3, then because of this loop 2 spaces will be printed, cursor will be on this location, and this loop will be executed for 3 times. Why? Because I is 3 and j is initialized to 3, so we are going to check this condition. So this loop will be executed for 3 less than equal to 5, so total 3 times. So it will print 3 stars, and then cursor will be here, and because of this statement it will come on to the next location. So similarly whole process will be continued. On the next line 3 spaces will be printed, then only 2 stars, then 4 spaces will be printed, and finally a single star. And after printing this 1 star, cursor will shift to this location, and because of printf statement it will come on to the next line, and then the program will be terminated. This is 30th program, and in this program we are going to check the next pattern. Expected output is something like this. Like the previous program, we also have spaces in this section. So let me first explain logic for this program. We will require a loop for repeating these rows. So suppose user has entered 5, so there would be 5 rows. Then on the first row, total number of star is 1 and number of spaces are 4. And then on the next line, number of spaces are 3, then 2, 1 and 0, and number of stars are incrementing 2, 3, 4 and 5. So in order to print these spaces, we need our loop from 1 till n minus I. That is, when my n is 5 and I is 1, loop will be from 1 to 4, and in the next iteration of I, loop will be from 1 to 3 and so on. And for printing these stars in incrementing order, we will require another loop for j that will be from 1 to the value of I, because on each row number of stars are equal to the row number. So let me explain you the program now. So this loop is for your all rows. So user is entering n over here. Then this loop is for those n iterations starting from 1 till n, and then this for loop is for printing spaces. Notice that I'm using one new variable k starting from 1 till n minus I. So in the first iteration, n will be 5 minus I, which is 1. So 1 to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces will be printed in the first iteration of I, and then the for loop will be terminated. And in the next for loop, j is starting from 1 till j less than or equal to 1, which is 1 less than or equal to 1. So this loop will execute for one time, hence a star will be printed over here. Then because of this printf statement, cursor will come on to the next line, and then I will be incremented. So I will be incremented to 2. Then this for loop will be executed for 3 times. So 3 spaces will be printed, and then next for loop will execute for 2 times. Then 2 stars will be printed. Similarly, in the next iteration of I, 2 spaces will be printed, then 3 stars will be printed. Then in the next iteration, 1 space will be printed and 4 stars will be printed. And in the final iteration, where I becomes 5, this for loop will not be executed because the condition will be 5 minus 5, which will be 0. As we are initializing k to 1, k cannot be greater than 0. Hence, this for loop will not be executed. Hence, on the next line, space will not be printed. However, the next for loop is going to get executed for 5 times because I is become 5 now. And because we are initializing j to 1, so condition is 1 less than or equal to 5. So this for loop will be executed for 5 times. So 5 stars will be printed over here. Then the cursor will move on to the next line, and then the main for loop will be terminated. In 39th program, we are required to print this format. Now notice in this pattern, this half pattern we have already seen in the previous video. So this is one part and this is the second part. There is one more part which is required for printing spaces. Okay. Hence, for writing this program, we will require 4 loops. One will be for number of rows. Then one would be for spaces. We will be using k. Then the second part can be printed with the help of j. And again, the third part will be printed with using same j. So suppose user has entered, let's say 5 as row count. Then our first for loop is for 5 iterations starting from 1 till 5. Then in the next for loop, I'm writing k is equal to 1 and k less than or equal to n minus I. So if user has entered 5, so 5 minus value of I, which is 1. So 5 minus 1 will be 4. So the iterations will be from 1 till 4. So 4 times spaces will be printed. And then I'm initializing j to 1 and the condition would be 1 less than or equal to 1. Hence the loop will be executed for one time. Hence a single star will be printed over here. In the next line, I'm initializing j with 2. So this condition will be false because 2 cannot be less than 1. Hence nothing will be printed over here. So this initialization of j equal to 2 is done purposely so that a star will be skipped over here. If we would have initialized j equal to 1, then technically an additional row like this would have added over here. So to avoid that, I have initialized j with 2. Then cursor will move on to the next line. It will come to this block because of printf/n, and then I will be incremented to 2. So in the second iteration, this loop will be executed for 3 times. This will be executed for 2 times, and this will be executed for 1 time. So my output will be like space, 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 then star, star star. Then because of printf statement, cursor will move on to the next point. Then I will be incremented to 3. So in the next iteration, this part will be executed twice, this part will be executed thrice, and this part will be executed twice. So your output will be like this: space, space, then 3 stars, then 2 stars, and cursor will move on to the next line. So in the next iteration, this loop will be executed only one time, this loop will be executed for 4 times, and this loop will be executed 3 times. So the output will be a space over here, then 4 stars, and then 3 stars from next for loop. And then in the final iteration, this loop will be executed 0 times because my I will be 5 and n minus 5. So n is 5, 5 minus 5 is 0, hence k less than or equal to 0 holds false, hence this loop will not be executed. This loop will be executed 5 times because j is equal to 1 and j less than or equal to 5, hence iteration will be for 5 times, and hence 5 stars will be printed over here. And then for final for loop will be from 2 to 5, hence 4 stars will be printed. So this final for loop is going to execute for 4 times, and because of this last slash n, cursor will be shifted here, and after that program will be terminated. This 40th program is almost similar to the last program that we have seen, in which pattern was like this. So to achieve this result, we don't have to do anything much. We just need to reverse our main for loop. So we need to start from 5 and go up to 1. Rest of the for loops are as is. We don't require to change anything over there. So let us see how this will be achieved. I am breaking this pattern into 3 types as done previously. So these will be used for my spaces. So I'll be using k variable over here, and this will be for my j and j. Okay, so this is for your basic iterations. So if user has entered 5, so number of iterations will be 5, but we are starting from 5 and going till 1. So in the first iteration, value of I will be 5. Because k is initialized to 1, our condition will be 5 minus 5, which is 0. Hence the first condition will be false because 1 cannot be less than 0. Hence this part will not print anything. But second for loop will be executed for 5 times. Hence it will print 5 times star on the screen because the condition will be 1 less than or equal to 5. Hence 5 iterations. Similarly here the condition is same. We are resetting value of j to 2. Hence the loop will be executed from 2 to 5. Hence 4 iterations. So here 4 times star will be printed. Then because of this printf slash n, cursor will be moved on to this location. Then in the next iteration, value of I will be decremented to 4. So here my condition will be 5 minus 4. So starting from 1 till 5 minus 4, that is 1. Hence for one time a space will be printed over here. Then for this for loop, iterations will be from 1 till 4. Hence 4 times star will be printed over here. And for this part, 3 iterations would be there, so 3 star will be printed. Then cursor will move on to the next line, and same thing will happen. Spaces will be incremented, number of stars will be incremented for j on both the for loops. In the fourth iteration there would be 3 spaces and 3 stars in total, then 4 spaces and a single star, and final loop of j will not be executed because in the final iteration I will be 1, and because we are initializing j with 2, so 2 cannot be less than or equal to 1, hence this part will not be executed, hence there won't be any additional star. And after that, because of this final printf slash n statement, cursor will come to this point and this condition will be false and I will be decremented to 0, hence 0 greater than or equal to 1. It is a false condition, hence this for loop will be terminated and your program will be completed. In this next pattern, this pattern is combination of last 2 programs. If you check it carefully, this program is part of 2 patterns that we have already seen. So this is nothing but the combinations of 2 programs. So this first for loop is to print this part and the second for loop is for printing this part. I have already explained you these 2 programs in detail in previous videos. So I strongly encourage you to try this program by yourself so that you get clear understanding of pattern programming. Only important thing to notice over here is that suppose user has entered 5 So these are 5 rows, however here are 4 rows. So in the second for loop, I have initialized I to n minus 1, that is 5 minus 1, which is 4. So that is why number of iteration will be 4 in this case, and here it will be 5. That is the only important difference comparing to the previous programs. The rest of everything is same. In the coming videos, we are going to take few more examples related to patterns, but this time instead of spatial symbols like star, we are going to use characters, spatial symbols, ASCII characters and numbers. In the previous videos, we have seen few programs related to patterns. We are extending our study for pattern programming in this lecture as well. So in our 40-second program, we have given this pattern. So just to revise, these will be our row numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and these will be our columns 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now to repeat this, we will require one for loop, and to print these numbers will require another for loop. Now we are sure about this first for loop, which we usually write like this for each row. So for printing rows, we use this for loop. So these are nothing but your iterations. So we are going to write first loop for iterating n times. Here, suppose user has entered 4, then iteration will be for 4 times. And for the second loop, we need to restrict number of printing these values to the row numbers. Like in the first row, we have printed 1 number. In second row, we have printed 2 numbers. In third, 3 numbers. And in fourth, 4 numbers. So in the second loop, it has to run starting from 1 till your row number. So I'm writing second loop j equal to 1, and condition will be j less than or equal to 1, and I'm incrementing j by 1. And inside of this loop, we are just displaying value of j, so that on every row, value always starts from 1, 2 and 3. And as soon as value of j equals I, then this loop will be terminated and the controller will go on to next line because of this printf /n statement. Once the row is printed, value of I will be incremented, and then the iteration will be continued for the next row. So let us see how output will be printed. Suppose user has entered 5, then this loop will go on for 5 rows starting from 1 till 5. So these 5 rows will be utilized for printing. And hence in the first iteration, when I will be equal to 1, the condition will be true because 1 is less than 5, and the loop which is inside will execute for j is equal to 1 till j less than or equal to 1. So only for one time value of j will be printed, which will be 1. And then cursor will move on to next display unit. Because of printf /n, it will move on to next line. Then value of I will be incremented to 2. Again, the condition will be true, and this time loop for j will be executed for 2 times. So it will print 1 and 2. So this whole process will be repeated like this, and in the final iteration, these values will be printed. Cursor will be at this location when this for loop is completed, and because of /n, it will move on to next line. At the end of this loop, value of I was 5, which will be incremented to 6, and condition will be checked as 6 less than or equal to 5, which is a false condition. Hence this for loop will be completed, and that will end your program. Pattern given for program number 43 is almost similar to the previous program. Now only one thing to notice over here is, if these are your row numbers and these are your column numbers, then you can easily notice that we are required to print row numbers, and the row number has to be printed till your column number is matched. If we assume these rows to be I and these columns as j, then we are required to print value of I for I times. So on row number 3, we are displaying value of I 3 times, and on row number 4, we are displaying value of I for 4 times. So this is first loop for number of rows, and in the second loop I am running the loop I times by initializing j to 1 and checking the condition as j less than or equal to 1. So if I is 3, then this loop will be from 1 to 3. So let us see how this program will execute. Suppose user has entered 5 as input, so n is equal to 5, and I'm initializing I to 1, so condition will be checked till 5. So this loop will execute 5 times, and inside of that loop I have initialized j with 1 and I'm checking condition j less than or equal to I, which is 1. So this loop will execute in the first iteration for one time. So value of I, which is 1, will be printed over here. Then in the second iteration, I will be incremented to 2. Then the condition will be checked as j, which is again initialized to 1, less than or equal to 2. So this loop will be executed 2 times. So value of I will be printed twice, which is 2. Similarly, this process will go on and third row will be printed, then fourth row will be printed, and finally fifth row will be printed. Then value of I will be incremented to 6 and this for loop will get completed and execution for your program will be completed. In this program, we are going to print this as output. So to explain you the logic, we have seen this pattern is similar to program where we have printed star in the similar shape, but in this program, instead of stars, we are going to print characters. To explain the logic again, notice we have spaces over here which we need to take care of. So this is one area that we are required to print. Then we can consider this part and then finally this remaining part. So there are 3 sections. So we will require 4 for loop. One for printing spaces, second for this triangle, and third will be for this. Fourth is our common for loop that we always write for each row. So to start printing from A, we are going to use ASCII value of A, which is 65. I'm using K variable for printing spaces. So as we have seen earlier, we just need to loop this from 1 to n minus 1. So suppose if user has entered 5, so 5 minus 1, 4. So loop will be executed from 1 till 4. So 4 times spaces will be printed initially like this, and then in the next for loop, because I is 1, this loop will be executed only once. So inside of print statement, what is happening, I am taking 64 as a base value that will be added with current value of I, which is 1. So 64 plus 1 will be 65, which is ASCII value of capital A, and we are passing 65 to printf statement, and we are using %c as format specifier, which is a format specifier for printing character variable. We already know that all characters in C have equivalent ASCII value. In this case it is 65, which is for A. So when we pass 65 and instruct printf to print it as character, it will print capital A on the output screen. So here in the fifth column, capital A will be printed. Now in the second loop, because we have initialized j with 2, so this condition will be false because 2 cannot be less than or equal to 1 as I is equal to 1. So this part will be skipped, and because of this printf, cursor will move on to next line, and in the next iteration I will be 2. So loop for k will execute for 5 minus 2 times, that is 3 times. So 3 spaces will be printed, and in the next loop, because I is 2, so this loop will be executed twice, and inside of this loop, because I is equal to 2, so 64 plus 2, that will be equal to 66, and character value for 66 in ASCII table is capital B. So capital B will be printed twice, and then this loop will get completed. In the third loop, j is initialized to 2, and because I is equal to 2, so this loop will be executed only once. Again 66, which corresponds to capital B, will be printed, and this for loop will be completed, and cursor will move on to next line, and after that I will be incremented. So this same process will go on till fifth row, and this is final row E. So that is how this execution will be completed. In this program for pattern programming, if you notice this pattern, it has these sections. One is for spaces, which is clearly visible, then this section, and then this final remaining section. So as usual, we'll require a loop that will iterate through the rows. In this case, I am using a decrementing loop, but based on your choices, these loops will change. That is, initialization and conditions will change for all of these loops. So just as a variation, I'm using a loop which is decrementing. So in this program, if user enters 3, then my initialization for I will start from 2, and the condition will be checked till 2 is greater than or equal to 0. So that is why if 3 is entered, then loop will execute 3 times starting from 2 till 0, and after each iteration value of I will be decremented. So when I is equal to 2, then in the loop for j, I am initializing j with 0 and checking condition as j less than or equal to 2, which is value of I. So this loop will be executed 3 times, and this value will be printed. So in the first iteration, value will be 65 plus 0, and then 65 plus 1, then finally 65 plus 2. So these are corresponding integer values for characters A, B and C. Hence in the output screen A, B and C will be printed, and then in the loop for k, I'm initializing k with 1, and the condition will be checked as k less than n, which is 3, minus current value of I, which is 2, so that is equal to 1. The condition will be checked as 1 less than 1, which is a false condition, hence this loop will not be executed. But then in the third loop, I'm initializing j with I, which is equal to 2 in this case, and then condition is j greater than or equal to 0, and then j minus minus. So again this loop will be executed from 2 till 0, so that is 3 times, and again the same values will be printed. So values will be 65 plus 2, then 65 plus 1, then 65 plus 0. Again these are corresponding integer values for character symbols C, B and A, hence C, B and A will be printed, and this for loop will be completed, and then finally this printf /n will bring cursor to the next line, and then value of I will be decremented to 2. So in the second iteration for the first loop of j, A and B will be printed because the loop will be executed for 2 times, and then in the next iteration for k, I'm initializing k with 1, and condition will be checked as k less than n minus I. So n is 3, and in the second iteration I is 1, so condition will be checked for k less than 2, that is 1 less than 2. Hence if we initialize k with 1, so this for loop in the second iteration of I will be executed only once. Then in the loop of k, 2 spaces will be printed here and here, and then in the next loop B and A will be printed, and then finally A will be printed because this for loop will execute only once, and then 4 spaces will be printed, and then this for loop will print a final A over here. To print these 2 spaces at a time, 2 spaces in this printf statement. That is why with a single execution 2 spaces are getting printed, because in the final iteration this for loop has executed only twice and 4 spaces have appeared. So at the end of it we have our 3 shapes like this. So this is first part, spaces is the second part, and this is the final part. This is very simple program. If you just notice a pattern over here, then this pattern we have already completed. So at the end of this pattern, we are just adding 1 after it on each row. But notice that on the single row, no part of first section is there. So we need to make a provision that printing of this section will somehow start from the second iteration, not on the first iteration. So in the program we are asking user to enter number, then I'm writing my normal loop. Usually in the previous programs we have written for loop starting from 1 till n, that is if user enters 5, so loop will be from 1 till 5, but here I have added 0 as well, so loops will be from 0 till 5, and somehow this first iteration we can skip so that nothing gets printed on the first line. So inside of loop we have another loop. I am initializing j with 1, and the condition is j less than or equal to I. So in this case I is 0, so this condition will be false, hence this loop will not be executed. And on the next line I am writing 1/n. So because in the first iteration cursor will be over here, it will print 1 over here, and then cursor will move on to the next line. Then after end of the statement, value of I will be incremented to 1. Then this for loop will be executed one time, it will print 1 over here, and then it will come out of loop, and again because of 1/n, 1 will be printed over here and cursor will move on to next line. So this same process will be completed till the 5th iteration. So output will be like this, and in the 4th iteration it will be 1 2 3 and 1. Then in the 5th iteration output will be 1 2 3 4 and 1, and after that program will get completed. So far we have seen many programs on pattern programming, but we have taken so many examples based on pattern. Goal was to make your understanding very clear on for loops. I'm sure you must have tried all these programs by yourself. In case you have not tried those, ensure that you work on those programs before you move on further, because in next lectures we are going to dwell into more interesting programs which will use combinations of decision control structure, that is if else, for loops and all arithmetic operators. So see you in the next lecture.